Alright, so we're back with another review. This time we're going to be taking a look at the Panasonic G85. Actually, I can't tell if it's written anywhere on here, but let's take a look at the Panasonic compared to the body of the Olympus EM5, which has been the frame of reference all this time. Here's the back. Here's the top. So let's get into some of the specifics. Right away you can tell there's kind of a meatier grip than the EM5, which is really nice for portability. As you bring it to the back, you can see there's actually quite a few custom buttons, FN3, 4, even an FN5 over here. One of the things that I didn't quite understand until I started using the camera was the auto exposure, auto focus lock button, as well as the ability to change the drive mode with a physical button, which actually turns out to be quite convenient. And it's one of the better back button focus setups I've seen for Micro Four Thirds cameras. Other things you'll see the kind of two buttons up here by the shutter. It's hard to tell, but they're not really standing out that much from the surface, so they're kind of even hard to notice when you're not looking, and you can feel around with your finger that they're there. So I'm not a huge fan of these. I also realized that you couldn't reprogram this video button, which is kind of silly to have so much customization and not be able to reuse that button. But it is what it is. Another thing that really stood out after shooting with this for a while was the ability to power it on and off with just one hand. I talked a little bit about the EM1 Mark II and how that was annoying. This power button here was great. I could just kind of hold the camera out here with one hand, hit it back and forth, power it up. As for these buttons, there's not a ton to say. They're pretty straightforward. They're not as easy to push as I would like, but they're passable. These buttons up here, same as the ones on the top. They barely stick out above the surface of the camera, so it's easy to kind of miss them, or it's easy to hit the wrong one if you're not looking as you hit the buttons. So pretty good ergonomics overall. Not the best, but really good for what I would consider to be an entry-level camera. So let's flip this thing on. Right now I'm using the kit lens. So this is the 12 to 60, 3.5 to 5.6. So far it actually looks really good, and it's worth keeping, especially for someone starting out. So what else did I notice about this camera? I think the first thing that happens when you turn this camera on and you start going through the menus is you realize the touchscreen is super useful. So the touchscreen, everything that you do on here, you can do through the touchscreen. One thing that really stood out was the ability to shift through the pages by hitting the up-down arrows here. When you have 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 pages in your menus, it's actually a huge benefit to be able to do that. So the touchscreen overall I think was a win. Let's get into camera mode and we'll show some of the other things I could figure out how to do with this touchscreen. So if we are in manual focus mode, and let's say we're trying to focus on that plant over there, and we start to turn the focus ring, it's going to punch in right there, a little square picture in picture. So there it is. And then you're going to see a focus to infinity to the left and a focus nearby on the right. Both the picture-in-picture popping up and the guidance on which direction you're focusing, I found super useful because I often forget which direction to turn the focuser on the lens. So that's up here. Other things that I thought were interesting about this touchscreen, kind of when using the camera, you have the ability to hit this quick button up here. I actually haven't tried. So it's called Quick Menu, which you use the arrows to scroll through. But if I put my autofocus back on, hold on, I'm gonna hit the Quick Menu again. So I'm putting my autofocus back on, and then I'm gonna choose this option called One Area. And what it lets you do is it lets you choose not only where on the screen it's going to autofocus, but you can pinch and you can set the size of the autofocus point, which is quite cool. And so it's pretty fast and pretty usable. So yet again, the screen itself is awesome. Definitely a worthwhile upgrade for camera companies that just haven't figured out how to use the screen. So I'm gonna flip back this way. Other things, I don't think there's anything else that stands out immensely on the screen. Actually, while we're here, I think it was on page 7. The FN button setup, this I found to be much, much better than other cameras in terms of how you set different buttons. So you can see all the custom buttons on one screen, and then if you want to change that custom button, you just click it, and then you scroll through the pages. In this case, I'm going to leave it there, but you just can scroll through the pages and you can choose, and I think kind of on the fly reconfigure all the different buttons and how they're set up, which makes changing your settings pretty quick. So I'd say ergonomics well above average for a camera like this. Configurability and touchscreen. I've heard people say in reviews that they thought it was good. I just never understood that it was really this good. So let's take a look at this camera with some different lenses on it. Here it is with the Olympus 75mm 1.8. Good, well balanced, very easy to hold one-handed. And I've got some footage as well as some test shots photography-wise with this lens, so you can see how that image stabilization worked. And then here we are with 25mm 1.8 without the lens cap. To be honest, I think this thing is just a killer deal for $1,000 with the kit lens. A lot of people are recommending this for what seems like a lot of video work, but I think even for photography work, it's just the absolute best starting point for someone looking to get into more serious photography or cinematography or videography. And when I think back to the EM5 or even the Panasonic GX1 that I started with, I really think this is a much, much better camera, a much more modern camera with a touchscreen that'll come more naturally to a lot of people. And there's another thing that made my experience learning about this camera particularly positive, and that is the use of a tutorial. I think I'll have to check where I got it from. I think it was DSLR Shooter, but they created a D85 video guide that's broken down into sections that help you get the camera set up for video. I was able to find other videos online that talked about the photo aspects, but nothing was quite as good as that particular guide for video. And I just remember back when I started with the EM5 having to spend quite a lot of time digging through the manual, figuring out any of the settings, trying to make the camera do what I wanted it to do. As long as we're on the subject of kind of the different settings, something else that really stood out was the ability to assign silent shooting. Let me make sure I got on the right setting. Silent shooting to a button. There we go. So I'm going to turn silent shooting on. Actually, let me turn it off and let me show you what it sounds like. So that's crazy. That's the shutter not on silent. That's the shutter not on silent. So here I'm going to put it into silent mode, and it goes from barely audible to 0. So that I thought was a pretty great feature, and the ability to kind of turn it on and off very quickly straight from the custom settings. The histogram is not quite as nice as the one on the EM1 Mark II, which I thought the kind of short one, the one that wasn't as tall but really wide, actually helped you at a glance get a better feel for where your settings are. But I do like being able to move this out of the way. Something else I really liked about the touchscreen is these custom settings that you can, I guess they're the equivalent of custom buttons, FN 6, 7, 8, 9. You can customize those. And what's nice is if you're shooting this way, where you are facing the camera towards you, you can operate these settings effectively straight from this side of the camera, since you can't reach the buttons kind of around the back side of the camera. You can operate it here, which is pretty smart. Things I didn't love so much about this camera, you know, this is probably user error, but while using this in photo mode, here's kind of the the AFS single point focus, and it's hard to get it back to center. You can see there's kind of a cross in there, so when it's off center, it's hard to get it back to center, and then sometimes it's hard to tell once it's actually acquired focus. I wouldn't say the camera is a slow focuser. As you can see, it's pretty quick. Yet again, for an entry-level camera, it's blazing fast. It's just not fast compared to the EM1. I just can't tell sometimes whether the focus has been achieved, and I think maybe it's just not enough of a change when it turns green on the screen. That was probably something that goes away when after spending a little bit more time with this camera. Something that I wasn't as thrilled about that I noticed, and this could be more a function of having a bad copy of a Panasonic lens, is the noise that the camera made focusing the Panasonic 14 millimeter, is it 2.5? 14 millimeter 2.5. So let's put this thing on. Let me make sure that we can hear it. And let's get the mic here just in case. So we're in the camera mode. Let's get into the movie mode. Let's make sure we're manual. And so you can see we're at 2.5. And so I move the shutter. It gets quieter as the shutter gets up to like 6 or 7. But that is the noise of the aperture changing on this, which I'm sure if you had a mic on body, it would pick it up. And overall, I noticed this camera was just, the focus on this thing also makes some noise. I think you can hear the motors turning. So I don't know if that's a function of having a bad lens or if that's the G85 motors, and maybe the higher end cameras won't have this problem.